Hey ladies and gentlemen, today I'm going to be talking about Celtic Salt and Redmond Real Salt. My name is David Benjamin, I'm the founder of Healthy Wild Free, and I discussed in a prior video the difference between Redmond Real Salt and Celtic Salt in terms of the mineral composition and basically the nutritional difference between these two salts. And just to recap that, Redmond Real Salt is an inland salt derived from Utah, and so it's not a sea salt, it's a mine-based salt. And it's quite literally a reddish salt, and it's actually good for your red blood cells. The nutritional composition is better for your red blood cells. So that's Redmond Real Salt. Celtic sea salt is from the sea, so it's a tad saltier, and it's richer in magnesium and other minerals that sort of benefit the hydration pathways of your body. And it makes sense because this salt is quite literally in the ocean, and this salt is on land, so this salt is better for hydration, this salt is better for cellular health, essentially. So that's sort of the nutritional difference between these two, but I recently found a report that actually made me question these two salts entirely because I've used these salts for years now, and I know the nutritional difference and I love the taste of both of them, but what I just recently found out was both of these salts are high in different levels of heavy metals. And these heavy metals range from aluminum to arsenic to cadmium to mercury, even potentially some lead. That lead wasn't tested, but there could be lead in them. And then also, when it comes to sea salts in particular, more so sea salts at least, you're going to be dealing with some form of microplastics, which is actually fairly low. It's actually lower than I would worry about. I'm more concerned about the heavy metals because the heavy metals are in higher concentrations, and the plastic the plastic levels detected in the sea salts was actually fairly low in all of these sea salts, so it's not really something I'm worried about. So first in this video, I'm going to talk about these different heavy metals and the health effects that they have on your health, and simply share with you why you want to avoid these heavy metals. So first and foremost, aluminum. Aluminum affects your brain health, and it quite literally deteriorates your brain. So the higher levels of aluminum you have in your body, your brain deteriorates, it can cause dementia and Alzheimer's. So that's why you want to avoid aluminum. Next we have arsenic, which is a known carcinogen, meaning it's cancer causing. It can affect your cardiovascular health as well as diabetes, our blood sugar levels, and just like neurotoxicity as a whole. Next we have cadmium. Cadmium hits the kidneys really hard, which is the filtration organs in your lower back, in that kind of region that filter in your body, and it has to do with fluid retention and whatnot. And too much cadmium will actually build up in the body, and this will cause demineralization of your bone mass, meaning it takes minerals from your bones and breaks that down. And you don't want to demineralize your bone mass because bone mass and bone density is it's a great longevity factor. It plays a role in longevity as you age. And then it also affects your lung cancer risk. And then we have mercury, which affects your cognitive function and your nervous system as a whole. And it's also a heavy metal. Mercury in particular really affects people's emotional well-being along with their cognitive well-being. So even in some people that have neurodegenerative diseases or conditions, you'll see their cognitive and emotional states be affected. So that just could simply be high levels of mercury. Last, we have lead. This will affect your brain as well and damage your nervous system. So these heavy metals you want to avoid. You not only can get heavy metals from salt, obviously, now we're learning this, but different cookware that you use. Heavy metals are also found in fish. And there are other sources of heavy metals that you want to be aware of, such as lead-based paint and other forms of heavy metals that even just eating out of cans, right? Eating out of metal-based things or using different metals in your cooking process, heating up metals, things like that. So I'm going to share with you the two salts that we talked about, the two salts that are honestly the most popular salts and their levels of heavy metals, because believe it or not, these were some of the highest levels of heavy metals in these two salts, and they're two of the most popular. So we have Celtic Salt first, and I'm going to share with you parts per million and parts per billion. Celtic Salt has 171 parts per million of aluminum. Redmond Real Salt has 229 parts per million of aluminum. Both of these are incredibly high in parts per million with aluminum. Next we have arsenic. Arsenic was 36 parts per billion. Parts per billion is more diluted than parts per million, so it's far less, but still 36 parts per billion of aluminum, and this has 82 parts per billion of aluminum, Redmond. And then we have cadmium. Celtic sea salt has 1.19 parts per billion, 7.32 parts per billion of cadmium. And then mercury was not traceable. So both of these were incredibly high in aluminum, and along with that, you have arsenic and cadmium. And aluminum, once again, horrible for the brain, horrible, its potential for leading to Alzheimer's, dementia, things like that. So these two salts, which I just talked about in my last video, nutritionally are great, but it turns out they are rich in heavy metals, which is incredibly unfortunate. So the two lowest salts, the two healthiest salts that you can possibly get were Baja salt, Baja Gold mineral salt, which is actually a salt I recently discovered, and I just got some of this, and it's honestly, I kid you not, the most delicious tasting salt I've ever had in my life. It has that extra salty, but in a way that isn't, like when you put too much salt on food and it's not good, not that kind of extra salt. The extra salt that is just right when you cook something and it leaves that like little bit of salt on your tongue that just tastes delicious. Baja Gold mineral salt is amazing because it has 3.63 parts per billion, which once again is more diluted than parts per million of cadmium. And then we have Colima sea salt, which I get sometimes and I actually don't have right now, but that comes in a bag also. And that had 2.29 parts per billion of cadmium. And the traces of aluminum, arsenic, and mercury were all below detectable levels with Baja Gold and Colima sea salt. So I recommend these two salts. Colima sea salt markets themselves as microplastic free as well, and they're the lowest in cadmium and all other minerals because they weren't even traceable. So technically speaking, Colima sea salt is the healthiest salt you can possibly buy. However, it is probably quite literally double the cost of this, and it's about 1.46 parts per billion difference with cadmium. It's parts per billion, not parts per million. So the cadmium levels are very close between Baja Gold sea salt and Colima sea salt. So they're basically the same, arguably, and in terms of microplastics, they're basically non-existent based on the tests that were done on not just these four salts, but like 15 different salts. And I'll put that list below so you can see all those salts. Believe it or not, there's salts like, I think like David's kosher salt and some other salts that I don't personally see at stores often, but I've seen them in different places every once in a while, that were super low in heavy metals, and these salts were super cheap. The problem then becomes some of these salts are processed and they add, they chlorinate them, they bleach them, they do all sorts of crazy stuff to these salts where they process them and they remove they strip the mineral composition of these salts. So in terms of actual healthy salt, I recommend Baja Gold sea salt. I actually have a discount code for this. So it's cheaper than Colima sea salt, and the discount will save you even more money. But Colima sea salt, once again, is the lowest technically in terms of cadmium levels, and then all the other arsenic, mercury, aluminum levels were below a traceable amount. So I recommend Baja Gold sea salt or Colima sea salt. These are going to be the two salts I'm using quite literally from now on forever, unless I find another salt that is lower, but it's highly unlikely because these salts are quite literally hundreds of times lower in heavy metals compared to your Redmond and Celtic sea salt. So Baja Gold sea salt and Colima sea salt, I'll link those up below. Those are the best salts, the lowest in heavy metals, and heavy metals are something to watch out for, especially if you already have heavy metal toxicity in your body and your brain. It's not something that you want to add to that load with. So I'll link those up below, and I'll link up below the article with all of the parts per million and parts per billion levels of these heavy metals. That will be very helpful for you. And last thing, subscribe to the newsletter at healthywildfree.com/free. I'll put the link below to get 2 free courses, one on your sleep health and one on lymphatic health. These 2 areas of your life are so incredibly healthy or beneficial for your health, and these courses are free when you sign up for a newsletter. Make sure to like, favorite, comment, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Make sure to live healthy, wild, and free.